Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, and welcome back to the Karma Koala podcast. And in this episode, we've got Same Francis, who lives in I think in the Dominican Republic, but he'll correct me if that's wrong. And he's been doing a lot of work with Caribbean governments, talking about policy and how they can move forward their cannabis programs. And to that effect, he's just written a paper from Code Noir to GACP, GMP, Cannabis and the New Colonial Economy, in which the subheading says, quite rightly as well, the Caribbean is dismantling prohibition. The harder task is ensuring that legal cannabis does not reproduce an older economic order in which the South grows the commodities for standards, capital, certification and value are controlled elsewhere. I couldn't have said it better myself. You say it much better than me. Same, welcome to the show. Thanks for agreeing to chat with us. Before we start talking about the paper and the work you're doing, what led you to the Caribbean and why are you working in those jurisdictions?
Thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate it a lot. First of all, sorry for the accent. I'm a French citizen, so sorry for the
it's far more interesting than my accent, so it makes for much more interesting listening.
So I'm in Dominica, actually, not Republic Dominican.
Okay, Dominica. Sorry, apologies.
Small island between Guadeloupe and Martinique.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I start my journey, my professional journey in the cannabis industry in Europe, in France, around 2018, the early days of CBD, providing trainings for both entrepreneurs and professionals willing to step in the cannabis industry at the time. We used to have a lot of conflict between French law and European law at the time, so it was helpful for them what we used to do. Then when COVID hit around 2021, we chose to move to left France because we really believe in freedom, and we could not take it. Me and my family, we chose to move in the Caribbean because one of my partners is from Dominica, and we realized that in the Caribbean we can face the same type of problem that we used to face in France in the cannabis industry when it comes to developing an industry. So since 2021, we start to contacting different regulators all around the Caribbean, and we had some good response, and we had some partnership now with some of those governments all around the Caribbean.
And when you were initially contacting them, what were you saying to them, and were they jurisdictions that had already started making little whispers about what they might or might not do?
So the way we're working when it comes to global source and regulators is we're launching initiative with or without them. And we let them know that they can participate if they want.
Yep.
That's always the way that we work. So we start organizing small event about the cannabis industry, talking about the cannabis industry with key stakeholders from the private sector. When we start doing that, we're inviting ministry and officials from the government, and some of them, they reply, they want to participate, and some of them, we even receive sometimes like convocation, like order from the ministry to come to speak with them because they told us, for example, in Dominica, they told us, we did that exactly last year to give you the story. In 2025, we start to work deeply with the Dominican government. So we launched the first meeting, the 7th January 2025, we organized the first meeting, but for private stakeholder. The government reached to us and said to us that we need to stop the meeting. We cannot do that, they need to participate in that. So we went to speak with the Minister of Agriculture, the ministry in charge with the reform. And from that, we had the official partnership with the Ministry of Agriculture, a cabinet decision in Dominica since 2025. After that, 6 months after that, we organized the first symposium at the State House in Dominica. And since then, we're working with them and other governments like that. So the key, the thing that you need to understand when you want to work with this type of government, you need to do something valuable for the cannabis market, and you cannot be too dependent on what the government will do or not.
So are you mainly approaching them with the pitch of a public-private partnership? Is that what got them into discussions initially?
Yeah, they have interest in developing their economy when it comes to cannabis because it can attract a lot of tourists. Most of this industry rely on tourism.
Yeah.
So and the cannabis can have a big influence in the GDP. What they notice, and I think what they like the approach is that we said to all the government we're working with that what we're doing we can do without them. It will be better with them, but we can also do it without them. So we're working with government, of course, but we're working also with the private sector, with some organization like cannabis association all around the Caribbean, to develop also from a private sector point of view. Basically, what we're doing is lobbying, and to put pressure on government, it need to come from both sides. So it need to come from the ground, the people, the real power, but it need also to come sometime by the top. When I say the top, is sometimes regional organization like CARICOM in the Caribbean or OECS. You understand? When it comes to cannabis, we have we're collaborating with the Caribbean Cannabis Forum, which is all the regulator from the OECS space. So they already have a common interest. They want to achieve low harmonization in the Caribbean framework to allow movement of product in the Caribbean space. That's also one of the points of my article. To do that, we don't need to follow GACP and GMP. I don't say that we need to lower the safety standard, but we don't need to follow European or American safety standard to allow exchange of product.
So was that the main thing that led you to write the paper? Was the external European standards that were being I wouldn't use the word forced, although it probably is the word to use, forced or put upon local producers, because this is the same experience I'm seeing in South Africa, and it's a huge discussion. And I would suggest throughout the African continent, and if we looked at Asia, that would be a discussion as well. If you're forcing external pharmaceutical, you know, rules upon an industry that might, in some aspects, might be creating those sorts of products, what, 10-20%, but really the other 80% doesn't need to be produced under those rules and regs. Was it through discussing with governments that you saw this as a problem in multi-jurisdictions across the Caribbean?
No. I think this is a problem that is deeper than cannabis. You can see it in cannabis, obviously, but you can see it in all aspects of human life, basically. And we can say that it comes probably from trauma. A lot of region, when it comes to the global south, we can say it like that, maybe they lose part of their identity. Let's say it like that. They don't know who they are. And when I say that, it means they don't have their own economic system. They don't have their own political system. They don't even have sometimes their own spiritual system. So in a way, they don't know who they are. So they will trust what is dominant, what is the norm. So that's why for them, it's logic to go.
A lot of Afro-Caribbean communities could draw from, African senses of governance, but every time you go and see a government, you go and see them in a European-style parliament with offices next. So the whole setup from the very beginning is placed within that environment, isn't it? So all the thinking is going to be set up within that sort of environment as well, isn't it?
I agree, 100%.
So let's talk us through the paper. That's the first thing that you talk about is external forms of governance and how they make, we're talking about cannabis here, how we how those external forms of governments force upon the people who want to be involved in, and we'll call it an industry, or a sector, but they can't adhere to that language and those rules. So, are you trying to work with governments in the region to create alternative solutions to that thinking, that paradigm?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I appreciate that question a lot, Sean. First of all, what I can say is the difference between Europe and Caribbean is the age of regulator. We have mostly 40 years old regulator in the Caribbean when it comes to cannabis industry. So they're familiar with cannabis and they understand what is cannabis. They're way less trauma. And to answer your question, yes, we're trying to do that. We're trying to put a Caribbean standard for the Caribbean country, for the Caribbean economy. And what it makes sense for us because there is history when it comes to cannabis in certain regions of the world. We can think about the Caribbean, we can also think about Morocco or even Nepal. There is even pain when it comes to cannabis. For example, in Dominica, in the 70s, we had the Dread Act. It was a law that allowed people and policemen to kill Rastaman on sight. There's people that die because of this way of living. You understand? So it's really deep. And it gives also a legitimacy. I forget the name, sorry.
Legitimacy, that's exactly right.
Yeah. When it comes to cannabis standard, I think, for example, one of the stuff that we're pushing right now, it's early stage, but we start working on that, is a ITAL label, ITAL standard. ITAL is way of living and eating for the Rastafarian community, totally natural. And when it comes to cannabis, there is a process when you grow cannabis in the ITAL way. You need to respect even the cycle of the moon and certain stuff.
It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned ITAL because if you think about it, people in France would understand that idea pretty well, wouldn't they? In terms of the way that they live and eat as well.
100% is use the terroir and put it in most value that you can do from that. And in France, it's similar to wine. A lot of people, they understand when it comes to quality label. We have a lot of that in France. Quality label for cheese, for wine, for a lot of different products, champagne also. So yes, we used to that. And that's why I say there's a lot of good stuff to protect the history, to protect the legacy that we have all around the world. And it's done in France, it's done in other parts of the world. I think it needs to be done in the Caribbean, and not only for the way of producing cannabis, but even for the land race. That's why we're pushing also a way to preserve all the local strain that we have in the Caribbean. I think that's also something very valuable because we are at the beginning of the cannabis market, the legal cannabis market, let's say. And a lot of those trends are totally ignored by the general public because right now everybody rushing for high THC potency. I think there's something else, another direction, maybe more natural, more therapeutic, maybe more medicinal, let's say, to approach cannabis. So yes, 100%, we're trying to build with the regulators all around the Caribbean to make them understand that most of them, they totally understand that first, the Caribbean need to come as one big market together. Dominican alone is 100,000 people, even less than that. The whole Caribbean is about 30 million people.
Well, this is what I was going to ask you next is, the Caribbean covers a big geographical area. It's quite culturally different across its various jurisdictions. It used to have a binding thing like cricket, for example, but even now cricket really it doesn't have that same, to me, it seems more a sense of a large amount of different thinking jurisdictions than CARICOM as a group. That you know better than I. I don't live in the Caribbean. All I can do is look at it from the outside. How difficult is it to get these various governments all working together and thinking in a fairly similar manner on this issue?
Thank you for the question. I think the main word there is common interest. When you come to Europe, the Italian is totally different from the German or from the Poland guy, you understand? But they have common interest. That's why they can work together. You're totally right. In the Caribbean, it's the same. A Dominican guy is not a Jamaican guy.
Yeah.
They're totally different, but they're also similar in certain way. For example, they have the same problematic. They face the same natural disaster. There's plenty way they're similar, but they have they have their own different identity. And we come to the word multipolarity. That's one of the main concepts when it comes to the International Society of Cannabis. We believe in multipolarity, especially in the cannabis sector. Every cannabis industry should be developed according to the narrative of every country. Dominica is the natural island of the Caribbean. The cannabis industry will be developed according to that. It will be a natural cannabis market. That's just an example. So how we work together as a region, because we have common interest. Unfortunately, Dominica alone is not big player in the cannabis global game. The Caribbean, yes, it makes sense, but no, there is a challenge, and that's what we're working on with all the regulators. How we organize, how you do the architecture of the market to make sure that every island has the right place according to their own strength and weakness. You understand? Let me give you an example. When it comes to testing laboratory, for example, Dominica will be probably a hub for the testing because we have a really good laboratory with all the requirements, international requirements, and even international partner potentially. It makes no sense to build another laboratory like that in St. Lucia or in Barbados. So we will probably use Dominica for the testing. The product that we need to be tested will go in Dominica, and then they will be shipped all around the world from different islands after the testing. It's the same for all the aspects of the market. We need to make sure that the architecture of the market makes sense and that every player, every country feel respect and feel that, yeah, it can have good impact like that in my economy. So that's the challenge. Make sure that every single interest is respected and make sure that the common interest and the direction is aligned with everybody. So, yeah.
And your big problem there in that region is right next to you. You've got this huge, empire that just uses the Caribbean as a playground, basically. And at the moment, if we look at cannabis in the US, it's consolidating very fast. I think, this week the news is that Curaleaf are buying. I can't remember which one, but it's really big. American economic hyper-capitalist approach, and they've already been in the Caribbean now for the last 10 years. Pulling out money in that standard resource sort of exploitation way. I presume the governments in the region totally understand what's happening and want to provide some counter to it. I suppose what my question is, we've been talking a lot about about European rules and regulations and having to manage that part of the process. And then in the other side of the sandwich, the other piece of bread is, Americans who can jump on a plane and got enough money to start a business that they don't have to pay so many taxes on, and then pull all that money out of a particular jurisdiction. How do you feel the Caribbean politicians understand this with regard to cannabis? And do you think they want to become, cannabis, the Caribbean is a major cultural exporter of cannabis culture. How do they become a trading bloc that protects all those small economies within that trading bloc, and also be able to sell best quality ITAL products to the rest of the world, that everybody knows within themselves that if the Caribbean can do it, it'll happen because people perceive the Caribbean as a place to get really good quality weed, basically. So how is this happening? And is it a 5-year process, a 10-year process?
So first of all, what I can say is that we're lucky in this cannabis industry in the Caribbean to have really, really smart and bright people when it comes to regulators. They're really smart and alert. They understand the global game. And what they did, all of them, it's put in the law.
And they've all been trained. I mean, if you say because of the how diverse the Caribbean is, they've all been trained in a range of different legal systems. So they've really got a lot of connected knowledge that
Yeah.
almost in a way gives them advantage over some of the source countries where their law comes from, I would imagine, because they can share and mix that law, those regulations, and the way that you process that law much more than you could in the UK or you could in Spain, I would suggest.
That's right. That's why they're smart and they're humble because also of the reality. They understand that they're connected to reality, so that they're willing to share with other regulators. They connect. One of the first events we did in Dominica, Shanika Roberts, who is the CEO of the Cannabis Authority in Barbados, the BMCLA, she came in Dominica to support us because they understand that they need to organize together and they share together. So it's really, really good. It's really useful. It's really effective to have this type of regulator that they're humble on that way and they're willing to share. That's why I said that they're really smart and they understand that the goal for all of them is to be a bloc, a Caribbean bloc. They understand that exporting at the beginning of the market is not really doable. It's not really feasible. It's very difficult. There's a lot of competition. So we need to build the local market, but also the tourist market. We need
So
to focus on
intra trading and a lot of communication.
also thinking about new commercial road. Why not thinking about producing in Caribbean and selling in Brazil? Brazil is a huge market. It's becoming a huge market. So there's maybe new commercial road that can happen. And we can also think about the hemp economics. A lot of countries in the Caribbean, they also put the law for hemp. For example, St. Lucia, they have a law for industrial hemp now, but it's in parliament right now. So they understand that. So we have the willing of the regulator to focus on that. On the other side, we need the private sector. The regulators alone, they cannot do anything. That's where I think we have a lot of value for them because we need to organize and to push businesses, entrepreneurs in the cannabis sector.
And I should throw it at this stage, right, you're not just talking to people, you're creating knowledge bases that support this. So you've got the International Cannabis Society, and then and I should remember the name of it, but I don't, that your new product, which is a news-based and a database product that you've got online. Do you want to quickly talk about those and how you see those supporting the regulatory agencies, but I presume they're also simple information sources for politicians and business within the region to understand how they can involve themselves in the sector, yes?
Yeah. So yes, I'm the CEO of the ISC, the International Society of Cannabis. And yes, what we're doing is helping emergent market in a global source to develop their cannabis industry and also helping more developed cannabis industry company enter global source market. So when it comes to developing the local market, we already have a lot of, we're not only advisor, that's why we need to understand, we're also operators. So we're running a startup studio and we're running different ventures in the cannabis space all around the world. We're helping entrepreneurs because we also have an incubator. In the Caribbean, for now, it's only for women. So we're helping 25 women every year.
That's a much smarter move. You'll actually get businesses up and running, and where they don't steal all the money. So
I can explain why.
I would suggest that that's the smartest move of all.
Yeah, but I can explain why also pragmatically, because in the Caribbean space, what we notice in the different islands that a lot of men are focusing on the producing part. They want to produce cannabis. But we cannot make an industry only with that, especially when it comes to tourism. We need to have byproduct. And we notice that a lot of women, they're more focused on byproduct. And us, we need byproduct. Producing, okay, we will produce anyway, but we need byproduct. That's why we're focusing right now on
Right.
women.
Yeah, we need women because they know how to think much better than men, basically. We'll just grow it and put it in a bunch of barrels and then leave it there in the shed. They actually get on and actually do something with it.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening right now. But yeah, so to build the market is not only the regulators, it's both sides of the game. Is the regulators, we need to have the regulators aligned, but also the private sector. Because the regulators, they regulate. They don't do anything. They don't
No,
build
no,
the
of course.
market. That's all. So the value there is if you want to enter, if you want to develop your business in the Caribbean, also in Africa, in the global source, yes, you can contact International Society of Cannabis. As you say, we have a new project called Nexus AI. It's a system basically to help any company from America, from Canada, from Europe, for more mature cannabis market enter global source market. Why are we doing that? Because it helps us also to filter. We don't want anyone to come in those markets. We don't want those countries to become cheap producer for the North.
Yeah.
We want to be building system that can be owned by the people and be profitable for the local economy all around the world. That's what we're doing. So this role helps us to be like a gateway for the business in the global south. It helps us a lot to filter and to block certain companies that can take over too early or be dangerous. But as I say, we have really, really bright regulators and they put in the law protection for the local economy, for the local regulators, when it comes to tax or when it comes to ownership, when you build company in the Caribbean. So we're pretty safe on that aspect because it's in the law already for all the jurisdiction.
And you're doing this work in the region. You can't do it by yourself. Are you finding other people like yourself coming
Yeah.
up? And look, again, it comes back to the cultural thing is if you're from Dominica, it's going to be much harder for you to get hold of Jamaican politicians than it would be for a well-connected lawyer or somebody in Jamaica. How are you seeing more people like yourself coming up and thinking in the same way and trying to create those connections from other parts of the Caribbean?
Yeah, there's some people in other part of the Caribbean, but we have a network. I have a good network and I have good partner that I can say. One of the partner I have is the US Global Business Council. It's a global NGO. They work in diplomacy with a lot of regulators all around the world for economic development. So it allow me to connect with even ministry level all around the world. So that's one of the partner. What we're doing with ISC is building a network. In every country we're tracking the market, we have one agent in the country that's close to the government, close to the regulators. Understand? In Morocco, we have somebody. In Uganda, we have somebody. In Kazakhstan right now, we have somebody. So that's why we're building. Before we say that we're tracking a market, we think it needs to come from, as I say, both sides, from the ground and from the top. So we need somebody on the ground, on the field, that can understand the local market, that can understand the mindset over there. So that's how we're working. We always having somebody on the country. In Brazil, we have somebody also. We have somebody all around the world.
So that, I mean, that leads to your creating relationships with other countries from the global south or Central Asia and smaller countries rather than having to go through the prism of the US or the I said prism, not prison, although you could apply the same word to both. So, it's allowing you, it's a similar thing that I'm interested in is to create those relationships without having to be forced through the US or Europe to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful and there is a lot of opportunity in the global south. You have to check the data, but the growth right now is not in America and in Europe. There's a lot of growth all around the world, a lot of economic growth all around the world. So we believe we have partnership from the US and from Canada, from Europe, but we believing that they can provide knowledge, technical skills, even technology sometimes. So they can participate in the development in the global south. And I think we need them for a lot of them. And we believe also but the reality is that most of the capital from when you come to finance come from Europe and America. So you have to work with them.
Of course.
But there's a lot of good people also in America and Canada.
Well, no, and that's exactly the argument that I always use, because there's a lot of, when you go to new places and, it's immediately, death to America type approach. And it's like any society, 50% of people are going to be wanting to do good things, and the other 50% are more interested in themselves. And that applies to every society on the planet, however big or small. Nobody's perfect, but it's finding and finding the right people in the right places so you can work together and benefit one another, which is what I always thought cannabis would be its automatic setting. But of course, I'm naive, and it's not.
I believe in the same stuff, but I believe that we need to force people to do it, unfortunately. And to do that, we need to be strong collectively. So it starts really, really small, few people. Even the ISC starts with few people. And now we in a lot of countries all around the world.
It's the classic, have proper foundations with proper concrete dug deep and planned by an architect, not just shoved on top of the. Otherwise, the whole thing falls down, doesn't it?
Yes, we have one filter. We work only with people that really believe in cannabis. We, like myself, I really believe in the spirit of cannabis. I really believe deeply that cannabis will change the world in certain way, in the way that it can change the health system. It can change a lot
Well,
of.
I agree, and it will change the world more once humans stop their obsession with putting it inside themselves and see all the other things that it can do, and then that just becomes natural, the way that human beings use it in their bodies. But what we don't, we're so looking inward. If we looked outward and we saw the opportunities, especially I think of industrial hemp,
Yeah.
it really would change the world. But I don't think our thinking is as sophisticated enough yet to have got to that point.
I think there's people that start to see, like when it comes to geopolitical forces and the way the world is organized and based on cheap energy and on petrol, oil, basically. Yes, when you think about hemp, you realize that hemp can be dangerous for a lot of people because it can replace all the system. So there's people that start to understanding how deep it is.
Yeah,
It's not.
well, not yet.
It's,
And this is the funny thing, of course, the people who aren't fans of it understand it quicker that sometimes than the people who are fans. And we need to, well, we need to be aware of that and know how to combat
that's
that.
true. That's true. That's true. Like the people, they have to live in the system. They have no other choice. So they have influence from the system. Us, even if you don't realize that, but we bless because every day we're in the cannabis world. Every day we're talking about cannabis. Every day there is this energy around us because it's cannabis. I think in a certain way it's protective from the system because there is already a lot of trauma when you say cannabis for the regular people. So you're already like in a private place, like you're a bit isolated, like, let's say it like that. So it's kind of protect us. But as you believe, as you say, I wish that the cannabis market don't become the car market, the car industry, or that we don't need to. We can collaborate in good intelligence because there is a lot of smart people that have good intention when it comes to this market. The problem is they say yes, cannabis will change the world, but they don't understand how. They don't have a plan. They don't know how to do it. First,
And you got to work hard and not just dream about
exactly.
money from the
Yeah.
get-go, because that's not how it works. Look, Sameh, we're almost out of time. I'm just going to let everybody know that the paper that we spoke about in this podcast, from the Code Noir to GACP, GMP, Cannabis and the New Colonial Economy. I'll have it available on my information page, as well as links to Nexus and the International Cannabis Society. So if you want to get in touch with Same, you can get in touch with him directly and talk about the work that he's doing in the Caribbean, but more importantly, the work that the Caribbean is doing for itself. And I think that's a really important thing, distinction to make, because I'm seeing the same slowly within on the African continent, less so in Asia at the moment. But, I suppose I'd like to say, to end up to Europeans and North Americans, don't think you're the only players in the game, because the time will move forward and things will change. Same, thank you very much for being on the Karma Koala podcast.
Thank you very much, Sean. I appreciate it a lot.
Live and direct, live and a date no jive.
Legalize it. So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, great, Barry, a reefer.